I want to back up for just a moment to the chapter Horace Slughorn. About 4 or so pages into that chapter, and then we're going to go forward. Harry and Dumbledore are getting ready to go to Slughorn's, and Harry asks, why don't we just apparate to Slughorn's house? Meaning into Slughorn's house, okay? And Dumbledore says, because it would be quite as rude as kicking down the front door. Think of that for a moment and compare it with what happened in book 4. How do the Weasleys arrive at number 4 Privet Drive? They don't apparate, but they use the Floo network, which, from a Muggle's perspective, it's quite rude. It's kind of like apparating, right? Because at one moment there's nothing in your fireplace, and at another moment there's a bunch of people standing there, okay? Dumbledore then says, courtesy dictates that we offer fellow wizards the opportunity of denying us entry. Okay? So notice Dumbledore is teaching Harry there about courtesy, or to use the phrase that's used to describe what Vernon wrestles with in book 4, consideration. Okay? And then he also adds, by the way, most wizards have magical protections around the houses, so you can't just apparate into. Why didn't he just say that? He knew Slughorn had protections. Why not just say, because it would be impossible, Harry, because of the protections Slughorn would put around? It's not the point. He wants to emphasize the courtesy. We can go back to book 1, and every time Harry has a conversation with Dumbledore about Snape, what does Harry call him? Snape. And what does Dumbledore do? Every time. Professor Snape, Harry. Yet when Harry calls other professors by something other than professor, Dumbledore doesn't always correct him. Snape he does, okay? So, why? He's emphasizing that notion of courtesy, and hopefully this works, because courtesy is bound up with this idea. Chivalry, all right? What are we told is one of the hallmarks of Gryffindors? Chivalry. Where does chivalry come from? It's Middle Ages. I mean, it's related to the word cavalry, not Calvary, that's Jesus on the cross. Cavalry, mounted soldiers. Soldiers on horseback and stuff. And, French chevalier, okay? It's, by the way, where Chevrolet gets its name. I'm about 90% certain on that. Bound up with this whole notion of chivalry is this code of conduct, this code of behavior. And central to that code is this notion of chivalry, okay? Is this notion of courtesy. Courtesy refers to, literally, the heart of the court. It's courtly behavior, all right? And bound up in that is the notion of looking out for the other. Whatever the other is, the other person, the other woman, the other man, the other knight, the other lady, it's an emphasis not on oneself, but on someone outside yourself, okay? So, they go on and talk, and Harry notices Dumbledore's hand. And he asks him about it. And Dumbledore says, it's a thrilling tale. I wish to do it justice. I'm not going to tell you about it now. Okay? Describe his hand.
It's blackened and shriveled and dead.
It's blackened and kind of shriveled and, okay? Why? We don't know yet. Snape told Narcissa and Bellatrix what in the Unbreakable Vow chapter?
Dumbledore sustained a grave injury.
Since the Dark Lord's duel. So between the end of the school year and now, something's happened. We don't know what. We don't find out until the end of the year. Okay? How many of you have finished this book before? Has everybody read this? You've not finished
Not entirely.
it? Okay.
I'm close. You can split.
How close? Lightning struck tower?
You can split those away.
No, I don't want to spoil it. Okay, I won't mention it. So they talk about Inferi and such, and then they go on and meet Slughorn. Jump to Snape Victorious, chapter 8. Okay? What did we see happen at the very end, literally, last page, chapter 7? Anybody remember? It's Malfoy and Harry.
Oh, Draco's
Hogwarts Express. The train stops. Harry's in the luggage compartment over the seats in the carriage. The invisibility cloak falls off for a moment. Malfoy sees him. Okay, Malfoy uses the charm that freezes you. Harry falls on the floor, and just before he leaves, Malfoy stops on his face. Okay. Snape Victorious. Who rescues Harry? Tonks. All right. Nymphadora, by the way, is a real name. She doesn't invent that. There were 3 women in the early church, Nymphadora, Belladora, and I think it's Belladora, and I can't remember the third one, but they all end with Dora, okay? That Rowling just pulled out. So, Tonks rescues Harry, takes him up to the castle, and, what did I say, +7. And on around page 160 or so, she hands Harry over to Snape. Okay? Is that what Snape Victorious refers to? No, it's not.
I mean, it certainly is.
Can it? Yeah, it definitely can. Because what does Snape get to do
Put Harry in the gym.
before the term begins? When does the term begin? Does it begin at the beginning of the term feast? Or does it begin when students get onto the Hogwarts Express?
Feast.
It's probably the feast. Because in book 2, Harry's able to talk McGonagall into not taking house points from Gryffindor because of he and Ron flying the foreign Anglia to school. So, how can Snape take 50 points from Harry? Here.
The feast has already started.
Harry's late. That's why he gets the 50 points. And we're told, somewhere around 160, the paragraph that begins, Snape did not speak for a minute or so, the very bottom of that paragraph, the end of it. Harry clung to I got to go to the middle of the paragraph. Whatever Dumbledore had said, Harry had had time to think over the summer and had concluded that Snape's snide remarks to Sirius about remaining safely hidden while the rest of the Order of the Phoenix were fighting Voldemort had probably been a powerful factor in Sirius rushing off to the Ministry the night that he had died. Why did Harry come to that conclusion?
He doesn't like Snape.
Okay, he doesn't like Snape. Why else?
There's the old grudge between Snape and Sirius.
Yeah.
And James.
Okay, that's all true.
And Snape was always making snide remarks to Sirius about not being able to do anything.
Okay, that's true. That's what Harry
Yeah.
That's what the narrator tells us Harry says or thinks. Is there another reason why Harry comes to that conclusion? If Sirius rushes off to the Ministry of Magic because of all of Snape's snide comments, what does that do to/for Harry? Or let me put it this way, and this will probably give away what I'm looking for. What does it absolve Harry of?
When responsible?
How is he responsible?
Well, he was the one that went to the ministry and didn't think about actually trying to get someone to see if Snape actually was still there.
What does Hermione say back in the Order of the Phoenix in the scene in Umbridge's office? Okay? When they're trying to figure out, is this dream that Harry's had real? What does she tell Harry he has?
The hero complex.
Hero complex. She doesn't call it a hero complex. She calls it a savior complex. You always have to save people. And he's like, no, I don't. But even if I did, so what? Sirius is in trouble. What does Hermione ask for? Proof. Okay? Do they get proof? No, they don't. Harry interprets what Creature says, and he interprets it wrongly. Okay? So, now I'm getting to the part I wanted to get to. Harry clung to this notion. What's the notion? The notion that Sirius would not have rushed off to the ministry if Snape hadn't goaded him all year long, seemingly. Okay? Harry clung to this notion because it enabled him to blame Snape, which felt satisfying. And also because he knew that if anyone was not sorry that Sirius was dead, it was the man now striding next to him in the darkness. Notice, it felt satisfying. It made Harry feel better. But just because he feels better, does that mean it's true? No, it doesn't. I don't have time to do this, but I'm going to do it anyways. All throughout Book 5, and especially in the chapter Dudley Demented, okay, what do we often see Harry doing with the anger that he has inside? And it's especially described in that chapter where Harry goes off to the park and he sees Dudley and his gang, and he's hoping Dudley and his gang will come. I talk about it in the lectures, if you watched them. What does he often do? In fact, the narrator uses this language. Harry siphons his frustration, his anger, all of that stuff off onto/into Dudley. For a couple of reasons. One, it relieves it from himself. And two, Dudley can't do anything, because Dudley knows Harry has a wand. And in that sense, Dudley kind of, okay, metaphorically, not literally, Dudley kind of becomes like a pensive for Harry, that he can take those things that are bubbling up and put them aside. But in another sense, it's also Harry doing what to Dudley, similar to what Voldemort did to Harry. Why is Harry so full of anger throughout all of Book 5?
Because people don't believe him.
Okay, people don't believe him. It's true,
You know,
correct.
They're not telling him anything.
True, correct. Why else? What happened at the end of Book 4?
He saw Cedric. I mean, he had to.
Yeah, but before, actually it's after Cedric dies, very soon after Cedric dies, Voldemort returns, right? So he's now back, full strength, full power, full of anger, full of hatred, as he always was. And what do Harry and Voldemort have?
They have that connection.
They have that connection. Okay? Harry siphons his anger, frustration, and everything off into Dudley is similar to Voldemort putting a bit of himself into Harry. Harry puts a bit of himself into Dudley. Okay? So here, again, this is metaphorical. It's not literally happening. But it's like Harry is trying to transfer some of that anger and frustration from himself. Okay? Notwithstanding everything Dumbledore says in book 2 about choices in time and future and free will and all that kind of stuff, is Harry at least partially responsible for Sirius's death?
Ultimately,
Yes.
yes.
If Harry had never run off to the Ministry of Magic, who wouldn't have pursued him?
Serious.
Sirius wouldn't. Sirius would still be safe at home. Okay? So, Harry and Snape talk, so to speak. Snape talks. Harry just, fumes. And we're told, after Snape takes the points from Harry, the fury and hatred bubbling inside Harry seemed to blaze white hot. But he would rather have been immobilized all the way back to London than tell Snape why he was late. Why doesn't he want to tell Snape why he was late?
Because he's convinced Snape is still a Death Eater and that, whatever he's talking about has something to do with the Death Eater.
Okay, possibly. Why else? I mean, I think you're probably right there. He doesn't want to admit what Malfoy did. I mean, who got the upper foot? Malfoy did on Snape. He doesn't want to admit he screwed up. All right? But I think you're also very right. He doesn't trust Snape. Which is going to come out in this book, and even more so in the next book. Okay? So, go on from there. Hold on, I gotta figure out how many pages, 7 pages. Hermione notices Dumbledore's hand somewhere around 165. Harry says, I noticed it like that over the summer. And it's on that page, 165 or so, that Dumbledore announces Slughorn is here and he's taking over the position of Potions Master. And they're like, potions? Well, who's going to teach defense against the dark arts? And that's when Dumbledore announces Snape will. Okay? That's the title. Dumbledore then goes on, a couple pages later, 167 or so, and warns the students how dangerous the present situation is. Castle's magical fortifications have been increased over the summer. He tells them, don't use secret passages, don't sneak out of the school, etc., etc. Okay? Chapter 9, Half-Blood Prince. I'm going to try and get us up to, wherever my thing is, around page 423 today. Half-Blood Prince. Fairly early on, McGonagall's going over their schedules with them. This is like 1, 2, 3, 4 pages or so in. So around 174, 175. McGonagall goes over Neville's schedule with him. Okay? Talks about his owls, how he did. So it's based upon your owls that you get your new classes for the coming year. And she tells him, herbology, outstanding. Defense against the dark arts exceeds expectations. Why, by the way?
Dumbledore's army.
Dumbledore's army, Harry. Okay? Transfiguration, sorry, acceptable. She's the teacher. She goes, no, you have to do better than acceptable for Newts. He hangs his head. She's like, why do you want to do this? You're no good at it. I mean, she doesn't say that, but, you know, oh, my grandmother. Humph. High time your grandmother learned to be proud of the grandson she's got, rather than the one she thinks she ought to have. Okay? Notice she doesn't just stop. She should be proud of you for what you've achieved, Neville. And then what does she do? She gives him a reason, okay, for why his grandmother should be proud, particularly after what happened at the ministry. What did Neville do at the ministry? He fought Death Eaters. And lived to tell. Okay? Did a pretty darn good job of it, too. Notice, by the way, when they're fighting the Death Eaters, just to go back for a very brief moment, Harry throws something to Neville in the battle that Neville catches. Where am I going? It's the prophecy. What doesn't happen to Neville that happened to Broderick Bode? I think it was Broderick Bode. Yeah, Broderick Bode. Who had been imperious to try to steal the prophecy?
Oh, it didn't.
It confounded his mind because only the people who the prophecies are about can retrieve them. Harry can hold it, no problem. Neville can hold it, no problem. Notice, when the prophecy is delivered, as Dumbledore told Harry, when the prophecy was delivered, it could have been about Neville or Harry. Two boys born at the end of the 7th month, whose parents thrice defied the Dark Lord. We're never told how Neville's parents thrice defied the Dark Lord. We're never told, literally, Neville's birthday. Maybe it is July 31st. Maybe it's July 30th. Okay? But it could have been about Neville. Why was it about Harry? Because Voldemort made that choice. That's the thing Harry still, in this book, doesn't understand or hasn't fully accepted. He will by the time the book comes to an end. Okay? So, she goes on. Neville turns pink. Why? Ashamed? Embarrassed? Notice you can get embarrassed for a variety of reasons. You can be embarrassed because somebody praises you. He's embarrassed because of what McGonagall said. And we're told she'd never paid him a compliment before. Sorry, Longbottom, cannot let you into my new class. You have it exceeds expectations and charms. Why not take charms? My grandmother thinks charms is the soft option. And she tells him, take charms. And then what does McGonagall do? If this were the United States and they were following federal higher education law, she violates FERC, the Federal Education Rights, or FERPA, Federal Education Rights Protection Act. If one of your parents calls me to ask me something about, which the parents used to do that, ask me something about how you're doing in your class, guess what I'm going to tell them? I'm not going to tell you. They can't. Unless you sign a form that gives them that authority. You're protected. Your rights are protected by that. Look at what McGonagall does. Take charms, and I shall drop Augusta. Now she doesn't just call her your grandmother. She refers to her by first name. a line reminding her that just because she failed her charms owl, the subject is not necessarily worthless. She thinks it's worthless because she failed. She didn't just get, dreadful or acceptable. She got what? Troll level, okay? So, they go on. I just wanted to, point that little bit out. What purpose does that serve? What is she doing there? Building Neville up. Why? Into book 7. Neville has to become what Neville needs to become. And I'm not saying that McGonagall knows that, but Rowling does. Okay? And because what did Neville show in book 5? That Harry, Ron, and Hermione showed a Sirius in book 4. He's old enough. He can take it. Okay? So, they go off to Defense Against the Dark Arts. Snape starts teaching them, pages 177, one might be a portion on 176, and says, you've had 5 teachers so far in this subject, I believe. And they're like, you believe? Yes, we've only had 5. Okay? These teachers all have their own methods, priorities. He said, there's confusion. I'll be surprised if we manage to keep up with the Newt work. And he goes on and he talks about the dark arts. They are many, varied, ever-changing, and eternal. Fighting them is like fighting a many-headed monster. What's the name for a many-headed monster? A hydra. Which each time a neck is severed, sprouts a head even fiercer and cleverer than before. You are fighting that which is unfixed, mutating, indestructible. What's the point? It's kind of like what Gandalf tells Frodo. You're not going to destroy evil. You might stop it for a time, but after what? After a brief respite, it will take a new form. Okay? So, he says, your defenses must also be as flexible and inventive as the arts you seek to undo. Remember when Harry talked to Ron and Hermione when they were trying to persuade him to teach everyone Defense Against the Dark Arts? What was Harry's argument against them?
He got lucky every time and he had loads of help.
You don't know what it's like. It's not like I went in there knowing what to do. I got lucky and he had loads of help. If you think about what he says there, earlier in the novel, Harry's really angry because Ron's named prefect. And he's like, what did Ron ever do? And Harry goes through his mind all the things he's done on his own. And then in that scene where he's being questioned about Ron and Hermione, he goes through all the same things and he does what? He says, you helped me here and this person helped me here and Dobby helped me here. And he says, I didn't know, and Harry and Ron say, that's why we need you to teach us. So that we don't kind of go through a mental checklist of what we can do, but to help us to learn to think on our feet. Okay? So, nothing else really there. So let's go on. They go to potions. They learn about Felix Felicis. Okay? Which is what?
Lucky potion.
Lucky, good luck potion. Happy luck. Felix Felicis is like happy happiness. Okay? Chapter 10. House of Gaunt. Dumbledore calls for Harry for his first private lesson. Now, how did Harry's private lessons go in Order of the Phoenix? Occlumency with Snape, okay, did not go well for a variety of reasons. What's the main reason they didn't go well? Or is there a main reason?
I think that's kind of there were a lot of things that just got into the pot and that pot got stirred.
Okay. What's one of the reasons?
He wasn't practicing.
He wasn't practicing. Practice emptying your mind. It's not easy on a good day for a quote-unquote normal person. Why is it doubly, triply, nthly hard for Harry?
He has a lot going on.
Okay, why else? What else is in his mind?
He shares a connection with
A little bit of Voldemort, so you got that going on. Why else? He detests Snape.
He doesn't like or trust Snape.
He doesn't like or trust Snape. Okay? And notice it's in his occlumency lessons, Harry first starts to get a glimpse of a little bit about Snape. What memory does Harry see in Snape briefly? This is before he looks in the pensive. He sees a boy cowering in a corner. Father or a man yelling at a woman who is crying. He sees a boy in a room with a bare bulb hanging from the ceiling, doing what? Bzz, bzz, killing flies. Okay? What does that show us? Why does Rowling give us those images of Snape's childhood?
It kind of explains a lot about him of how he is like he is now.
Are we the way we are because of nature or nurture? Big theory, in educational and psychology. Well, maybe a little bit of both. The fact that we see Snape as a young boy cowering in the corner while his father is yelling at, maybe more, his mother, shows us what?
His life wasn't that great.
Dysfunctional family, right? Similar to anything?
Harry.
Is this a little similar to Harry's upbringing? Okay, Vernon doesn't beat up Petunia. He doesn't yell at her. He does Harry. This is a point of identification between Harry and Snape. It makes Harry think what about Snape? Or feel what for Snape? Little bit of empathy. And then during the exams, what does he see? His father and Sirius were jackasses. I mean, they do what to Snape that we saw in book 4.
They completely humiliate him.
I mean, literally, they do what to Snape that we saw in book 4. That Ron says, that's sick. That's really sick. When the Death Eaters have the Robertses up in the air, they turn Mrs. Roberts upside down. So her voluminous underwear are seen. And we see Snape turned upside down. And they say, Snivelus, maybe you should change your underwear. Okay? Your father wasn't such a great man, was he? Snape says, and you will tell no one. What does that do to Harry's psyche?
Messes him up.
Yeah, messes him up. You think he's still messed up?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because that is put what in Harry's mind that's going to bother him in this book, and then it's just going to, and I've never made this connection literally till just now, that it's just going to blow up or blossom in book 7. It's going to introduce this doubt. Doubt is the opposite of what? Certainty. Assurance. He doubts his father now, even though Sirius says, yes, we were jerks. And Lupin says, yes, they were jerks. Lupin was a bit of a jerk himself because, as he's going to tell us in book 7,
He didn't put a stop to it.
he didn't stop him. Okay? Doubt about his father, we're going to see, is going to get blown into doubt about everything. Okay? So, Dumbledore, House of Gaunt, around 197 or so, 196, he says, it's time that you know what prompted Lord Voldemort to try and kill you 15 years ago. Harry's like, I thought you told me the end of last year. I mean, the whole scene in your office when I destroyed everything, and you said the fact that I can feel this is what really shows I'm a man, blah, blah, blah. And notice, it was hard to keep a note of accusation from his voice. The note of accusation, that's this. That's doubt. Wait, I thought you were totally open with me. Did Dumbledore say at the end of book 5, Harry, it's time I tell you everything I know? No, he didn't. Dumbledore. Harry, you said at the end of last term you were going to tell me everything. And so I did. I told you everything I know. From this point forth, we shall be leaving the firm foundation of fact and journeying together through the murky marshes of memory into thickets of wildest guesswork. Okay. Did Dumbledore tell Harry everything he knew? No. He didn't. Why not?
Because it's not time yet.
It's not time yet. He's not ready yet. Other pieces have got to be put into the puzzle. Not that the puzzle has to be entirely complete, but it's got to be complete enough so that Harry can see what the entire image is supposed to be. So, he says, this is going to be some guesswork. Harry, but you think you're right. Well, naturally I do. Right? When you think you know something, what do you think? You think you're right. You don't automatically go, well, no, that's, I'm obviously wrong. People don't operate like that. So he says, in fact, being, forgive me, rather cleverer than most men, my mistakes tend to be correspondingly huger. What was the mistake Dumbledore admitted to at the end of book 5 before he talked about the prophecy? Why didn't he tell Harry in book 1? He tells us.
He didn't think Harry was old enough yet.
That's the excuse he gave. It's not the reason he gave. The reason he gave in book 5 was, when I saw you come to Hogwarts and I saw everything you achieved, went through, what happened in Dumbledore for Harry?
It's kind of a parent almost kind of wanting them to have a normal life.
Love, he says. I loved you too much to care for nameless people in things that might suffer, die in the future. So I waited. And in the second year, man, look what you did. And I thought, nope, not time yet. Why not? Because he wanted Harry to have as normal a life as possible. Book 3, you discovered Sirius. You had a family kind of situation, But then at the into book 4, he's like, I should have told you then. So, love is what he says. So, they go on. And he says, I'm going to take you down a memory of Bob Ogden, okay, Ministry for Magic worker, who worked for the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. And he takes Harry and they dip into the pensive. EIV, or I think it's that. I'm not sure that it's a dry erase marker.
It's like,
Oh, you're kidding me. It says, oh, there it goes. It's says dry erase. Whatever it is, okay? It comes from French pensée, thoughts. And if you are a pensive person, that means you're a meditative kind of person. You go inside yourself and you think a lot, okay? But this is a sieve, something that you do to separate larger material from smaller material, to sieve your thoughts, okay? And what do we see? We see Bob Ogden go where?
Was it Godric Hollow or was it wherever Draco's, no.
It's Little Angleton.
His family's house, which,
It's the house of Gaunt. He goes to Marvolo Gaunt's house. Who lives there other than Marvolo?
Morphin and.
Marvolo, Morphin, and Merope. Okay? What is Lord Voldemort's real name?
Tom Marvolo.
Tom Marvolo Riddle. Okay? So, we're not going to go through the entire memory. We're just going to, get to the end of it. And Harry's going to see some people in the memory. He's going to see Marvolo Gaunt. He's going to see Morphin Gaunt. And he's going to see Merope Gaunt. He's also going to see somebody ride by in a little carriage. Okay? This is around 209 or so, I think it is. And Marvolo and Morphin are going to joke about how Merope looks at that man in the carriage. Page 211. Dumbledore brings Harry out of the pensive, and Harry asks, "What happened to the girl in the cottage? Merope, or whatever her name was." "Oh, she survived." Ogden went back to the ministry, returned with reinforcements. Later, Morphin and his father attempted to fight. Both were overpowered, removed from the cottage, convicted by the Wisengamot. Morphin sentenced to 3 years in Azkaban. Okay. Marvolo, 6 months. Marvolo? That's right. Glad to see you're keeping up. That old man was Voldemort's grandfather. Okay. Marvolo, his son Morphin, and his daughter Merope were the last of the Gaunts. Very ancient wizarding family. Just like Harry is the last of what? The Potters. Okay. And we're told the family had a vein of instability and violence that flourished because of what?
They're after marrying their, second cousin?
Because they were marrying their own cousins. Okay? So, Dumbledore's talking and Harry's, doing the genetics. So, Merope, she was Voldemort's mother. Very good. And it so happens we also had a glimpse of Voldemort's father. The Muggle, Morphin attacked. The man on the horse, very good. Yes, that was Tom Riddle Sr. And they ended up married? Dumbledore says, "I think you're forgetting Merope was a witch. Do not believe her magical powers appeared to their best advantage when she was being terrorized by her father. Once Marvolo and Morphin were in Azkaban, what? She was alone for the first time and kind of like she blossomed, okay? She gave full rein to her abilities. Can you think of anything Merope might have done to make Tom Riddle forget his Muggle companion? What have they just gone over in potions? After Felix Felicis. Love potions. There it says, love potion. Dumbledore said, yep, I think she used a love potion. Okay? and they ran off and got married. He goes on and says, when Marvolo got back, he found out, and Maripay, Harry says she died, right? Wasn't Voldemort brought up in an orphanage? Yes, indeed. He says, so we have to do some guesswork to help fill in that puzzle a bit. He says, he returned within a few months of their runaway marriage. She, however, when they heard what he was saying, the villagers guessed that Maripay had lied to Tom Riddle, pretending she was going to have his baby and that he had married her for this reason. Harry, wait, she did have the baby though. Yeah, but not until a year after they were married. Okay? So, they didn't necessarily, we can assume, maybe they had sex on their wedding night, but she didn't get pregnant then. She didn't get pregnant till when?
3 months after they were married.
At the very least, or very most, whichever, 3 months after they were married. He leaves when after that?
3 months later.
Sometime pretty soon. We're told it's within a few months after their marriage that he returns. So it could be within a few weeks. She tells him she's pregnant and he splits. Okay? It could be within a few months. Harry, why'd the love potion stop working? Dumbledore, guesswork. I think she chose to stop giving him the love potion. Why?
She desperately wanted to believe that he could love her without it.
She wanted him to love her without the potion. And the love potion wears off and sayonara. Okay? That's enough, Harry. Harry's like, okay. And you think this is important? Has something to do with the prophecy. Yep. Can I tell Ron and Hermione? He said, yeah, I think that's okay. And he says, he looks at a little table and there's a ring. That ring, you were wearing that when we visited Slughorn. Very good, Harry. Have you always had it? Yeah, I acquired it recently. About the same time as your hand was damaged? Yeah, about that time. Notice Harry's kind of, being a bit astute. How many of you know Rowling's, for lack of a better phrase, marital history? When she finished her university degree, she went off to work for Amnesty International in Portugal. Met a dashing young Portuguese reporter. If you're familiar with this actor and you know what he looked like when he was younger, think Antonio Banderas when he was in his 20s and early 30s. I mean, the guy just oozed charm and romance and sex appeal and everything. Okay? Whirlwind romance. Got married very quickly, like 3 months. Got pregnant. And he ditched her. Like 3 months after they were married. Okay? Any parallels?
Oh, yeah.
You can't help but see them once you know that little bit of history, okay? So, Voldemort is the product of what? A dysfunctional family, again. It's over and it's throughout the books, all right? Is Voldemort the result of, or a child of love? That is, did Tom Riddle and Maripay Morphin, through an act of love, produce Tom Marvolo Riddle? apparently, and I've never verified this, okay? So it may be wrong. I've had multiple students tell me that they've read this, and I don't remember if they saw it on Pottermore or in an interview. I need to look it up. Apparently Rowling, if this is true, said that Voldemort cannot understand love, cannot feel love, cannot have love, cannot show love, because he's not a product of love. He wasn't conceived in love. Now just think about that for a moment. If she meant that, what does that suggest if you take that idea to its logical conclusion? What does that suggest about any person who is conceived as a result of a one-night stand? Because you gotta admit, a one-night stand is not love. It's not love if it's only for an hour or 2 hours or whatever. Or a child who is conceived as an act of rape or incest. If what she said is what she really thinks, and if what she said and really thinks is true, then what does it say about every person who's not conceived out of an act of love?
But what does it say about her daughter though? I mean, she
Yeah.
loved him, but if he left her in 3 months, did he really love her?
Good question. And that's, which is why I have a hard time believing she said that. She cannot be that superficial. Because that would suggest that anybody who is the product of those kinds of unions that I mentioned is incapable of love. Wow. And if they're incapable of love, does that mean that they are sociopaths? Because that's what that means. To be incapable of love is to be a sociopath. Every sociopath that's been known, found, arrested, etc., they're incapable of emotional attachments. Because there's something literally wrong up here. Brains of sociopaths have been examined, and there is an issue in, I don't remember what portion of the brain, okay? I'm just throwing that out there because we're gonna see a question later on in Voldemort's request, where Voldemort and Dumbledore are gonna talk about love. Okay? So, Hermione's helping hand. Couple pages in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, not a couple, 5 pages in, around 230, no, not 231, 221 or so. They're talking about, Harry, Ron, and Hermione are talking about Dumbledore and stuff and the problems at the school. And we find out, Stan Shunpike's been arrested on suspicion of being a Death Eater. And Harry's like, no way. Has to be under an Imperius curse. Okay? And they keep talking. And Ron says Hogwarts is safer than their homes, talking about students and stuff. Boundary. We've got auras and all those extra protective spells. And we've got Dumbledore. Hermione, I don't think we've got them all the time. As she looks up at the high table, and Dumbledore's not there again for the meal. So there's lots of times when Dumbledore's not around. Okay? Just little bit of foreshadowing. We have Quidditch and page plus 12, page 230 or so. They're talking with Hagrid, and they're talking about why they couldn't take care of magical creatures. Hagrid was like, I knew you'd find it hard to squeeze me in your timetables, but, if you applied for time turners, and Hermione says, we couldn't. We destroyed them all in the Department of Mysteries. Okay? Nice little plot device. Why? Why do I say that? If you have time turners, what can you do?
Go back in time,
And
which means they can probably get there before, maybe somehow get the thing that they need.
and go even farther.
Solve pretty much any problem.
If you know young Tom Riddle is going to turn out to become Lord Voldemort, the chapter where Harry and Dumbledore in the chapter The Secret Riddle. When Dumbledore takes Harry to the orphanage. And we see young Tom Riddle, doing magic without a wand and such. What could Dumbledore do with the time turner? And why didn't he?
That just messes up everything.
Bingo! That's the problem with any and every time travel story. Once you introduce the possibility of time travel, what can you do?
Anything.
It's
Take the primal myth, Garden of Eden. You go back and you kill the damn snake. Problem solved, right? There is no temptation for the apple. Period. Conflict over. You introduce that possibility, and there's no holding the door to the possibilities that time travel creates, okay? So, Rowling here, they've all been destroyed. We can't go back in time anymore. So we can't solve the problems magically, okay? It's the only reason I think that's there is probably between book 5 and this book, or between book 3 and now. She's gotten so many letters and so many questions that she has to put an end to the whole time travel thing. Yes?
I know we talked about it and you cannot stand it, but this also sets something up in the first trial, like this moment right here.
Yeah. Yeah, I've tried to blank as much of that out of my mind as I could. Page 235 or so. They're talking about what they had to do or go through or undergo when they first arrived at Hogwarts. Filch went over everybody with what?
Secrecy sensor.
Secrecy. I mean, they were wanded. Like going through an airport security. And Harry's like, what? I wasn't. Oh no, that's right, you were late. Well, Filch ran over all of us with secrecy sensors. Any dark object would have been found. Why wasn't Harry gone over with a secrecy sensor?
He got there and he came in with Snape and these two parties.
Okay, yeah, that's the ostensible, that's the literal reason. What's the deeper reason? Why couldn't Rowling have Harry be wanded with a secrecy sensor that would catch any dark object?
He has an invisibility cloak, so it's kind of.
But an invisibility cloak isn't a dark object.
It's Harry Potter, the one the Dark Lord wants to do it most. Why would he bring a dark object into the castle?
Okay, you're missing something really obvious. That we find out later in this book.
Well, he has that piece of Voldemort.
Harry's a dark object.
Okay.
He's got a Horcrux. Okay? So, which we're going to find out about Horcruxes very shortly. Silver and opals. Harry's practicing some of the Half-Blood Prince's spells. Remember, he's got that spell book that has written in the back, this is the property of the Half-Blood Prince. And Hermione's like, there aren't any princes in the wizarding world. We don't do that kind of silly nonsense and stuff, okay? Harry's practicing them and such. And he does to Ron in bed one night. You know, he's in his bed, Ron's in his. He does Levi Corpus. Levi, levitate, corpus, body. Ron goes up, and then he's trying to figure out what the counterspell is. Libera corpus, free the body, okay? But when he does that, we're told around 239 or so, and I think this is the first time this is indicated, praying that this is the right counter jinx, Harry thinks the counterspell. Notice he doesn't say it out loud, right? What have they been working on in Defense Against the Dark Arts? Nonverbal spells, okay? So he, Ron, and Hermione later on talk about the Half-Blood Prince and stuff, and Hermione says, you know, that this Half-Blood Prince, maybe he was a budding Death Eater, okay? And Harry says, well, I don't think that's likely. I mean, what budding Death Eater would call himself Half-Blood? I mean, if you're a Death Eater, what are you going to self-identify as? Whether you are or not, you know, a pureblood, okay? So, they go into Hogsmeade. And I think this is the first time we hear this phrase, other than once in Book 1, I believe, where Hagrid says it, and it's written like this. Okay? Somewhere around 244, 243, they're in Honeydukes, etc. And Ron says, thank God, as they were enveloped by warm, toffee-scented air. Let's stay here all afternoon. And then we hear Slughorn. I'm pretty sure it's Book 1. Hagrid says, thank God, emphasizing this pronunciation, okay? Big deal, right? Everybody says thank God, whether they believe in God or not. And yet, we're going to start to see that phrase, which we've not seen, other than the one time, I believe, by Hagrid, and spelled differently than it normally is. We've not seen it in books 1 through 5. We're going to see it here, and then we're going to start seeing it. And in book 7, it's just liberally sprinkled throughout, okay? Like it's meant, literally, thank God, all right? So, what does the silver and opals refer to?
The necklace.
The necklace, who gets it?
Katie.
Katie, okay? Where has Harry seen this necklace?
In the Burks. Yeah.
Borgin and Burke's, when he traipsed after, followed Malfoy and such, okay? Harry's thinking about Ginny when Katie Bell, you know, has the thing happen. He goes to tell McGonagall. What does he tell McGonagall?
That was Draco.
It was Draco. Draco's behind it all, okay? He wants to tell Dumbledore, but she says Dumbledore's not around. Chapter 13, The Secret Riddle. 258, 59, around 260. Dumbledore's talking with Harry. It's another lesson. Okay? And he tells Harry, or let me put it this way, he kind of gives a refresher over what they've discussed, very briefly. You will remember that we left the tale of Lord Voldemort's beginnings at the point where the handsome muggle Tom Riddle had abandoned his witch wife Maripé, returned to his family in Little Hangleton. Maripé was left alone in London, expecting the baby who would one day become Lord Voldemort. Why didn't she go home?
she didn't have a home to go home to.
Kind of. Her father had kicked her out. Why else? Like she wants to go back there. Okay? So, Harry, how do you know she was in London? Because of the evidence of one Caractacus Burke. Okay? He spills the pensive, and Harry finds himself where? Bergen and Burke's. Okay? And we see Caractacus Burke talking about this witch. Okay? Showing us what? It was brought in by a young witch just before Christmas. She needed the gold badly, covered in rags, pretty far along, having a baby. Okay? We hear that kind of story all the time. You know, this was Merlin's favorite teapot, blah, 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 blah. What was it she sold?
Slytherin locket.
A locket. Harry, he only gave her 10 galleons? This thing belonged to Salazar Slytherin? It's 1,000 years old? He was not famed for his generosity. Why? It's a pawn shop. You go to hawk a ring or something at a pawn shop, they're not going to give you the eBay value of it. Okay? So, Dumbledore says, she was in London, end of her pregnancy, she was hard up for cash. Harry, but she could do magic. She could have got food and everything for herself by magic, right? Book 7. What does Hermione teach Harry and Ron? You can't just magic food out of nowhere. You got to have ingredients at least. Dumbledore doesn't bother to tell Harry that at this point. Okay? He says, maybe. He says, but she stopped using magic. I don't think she wanted to be a witch any longer. Why?
Because magic had caused so much chaos in her life.
It didn't bring her joy, did it? It's also possible, so that's one possibility. It's also possible her unrequited love and the attendant despair sapped her of her powers. So notice, unrequited love can do what for a witch or wizard? Make you muggle-like. So, what's required for the power?
But how does that work with Voldemort?
Yeah, that's exactly my question. Okay? Or maybe it's required for the positive powers of being a witch or wizard. You know, expecto patronum, it comes from the chest, which is the location, the seat of the heart. So, Harry, she wouldn't even stay alive for her own son? Dumbledore's eyebrows raised. Could you possibly be feeling sorry for Lord Voldemort? No, said Harry quickly. Why did he say it so quickly?
Because he doesn't want to feel anything but hatred and disdain for Voldemort after everything he's caused Harry.
How dare you even suggest that, you know? I do not feel any pity for Gollum, Frodo says. And yet, once he sees Gollum, I do now feel pity for him. Okay? We could almost jump from here to the end of book 7. Which I won't say anything more. No, said Harry, but she had a choice, didn't she? Not like my mother. Your mother had a choice. What could Harry's mother have done?
Stepped aside.
No, go ahead, take him. James and I, well, actually, James and I can't have another, but, you know, Snape and I can have a child, you know. Mirape Riddle chose death in spite of a son who needed her. But don't judge her too harshly, Harry. What does Gandalf tell Frodo? Do not be too eager to deal out death in judgment. Okay? Don't judge her too harshly, Harry. She was greatly weakened by long suffering, and she never had your mother's courage. Okay? What else did she not have? James's love. Sirius's love. Lupin's love. Notice what James and Lily had. They had the Order of the Phoenix around them, protecting them, lifting them up, so to speak. She had nothing. Okay? So, another memory, Harry. This time, you're going into one of mine. Okay? And he sees a younger Dumbledore. He's seen a younger Dumbledore already once, right? When
Go to,
in the trial scene. Okay? So, this time, what does he witness? He goes to the orphanage. What's the name of the woman who runs the orphanage?
Mrs. Cole.
Mrs. Cole. Notice it's not Mrs. Sunshine. Mrs. Sugar, Mrs. Sweet, Mrs. Fuzzy Puppies, Mrs. Happy Days Are Here Again. Even though it's spelled Cole, what does it imply?
C-O-A-I.
It's very Dickensian, okay? Her use of this name. Describe Mrs. Cole. One word applies. Applies to Aunt Marge too, by the way.
Alcoholic.
Drunk, alcoholic. She smells like gin. You only smell like gin if you're drinking a lot of it and maybe spilling a bit on you. Describe her orphanage. Again, very Dickensian. It's like the orphanage in Oliver Twist. Okay? So we see young Tom Riddle, and what has he already started doing?
Tormenting people.
Tormenting people?
Using his magic.
Using his magic?
That's what it is.
Killing little animals? That is a dead giveaway for a future, louder, psychopath, serial murderer. Every serial murderer that's been caught, once they're interviewed and stuff, they start with, a neighborhood cat or dog or baby. So, what do we see Tom Riddle do when Dumbledore proves he's magical? His eyes kind of go, ooh, cool. And what does he immediately ask for? Where can I get one of those? He wants a wand, okay? So before he can go to Hogwarts, what does Dumbledore demand of Tom Riddle?
He gives back all the stuff that he's stolen.
Restitution, he has to return what he's stolen, and,
Return from the thieving and all of that.
okay? So, Dumbledore says, I can help you at Diagon Alley. He says, I don't need it. I can get by on my own. And then he says at the around 273, 274, he doesn't like the name Tom. But Dumbledore says, in response to Tom Riddle's question, was my father a wizard? He was called Tom Riddle too, they've told me. Dumbledore, I don't know. My mother can't have been magic. Why? It's the rest of his sentence.
She would have died.
Or she wouldn't have died. Notice what he assumes about magic. It will make,
Stop her death. He used the phrase Snape uses in potions and
it'll make you live forever. It can stop you from dying. Dumbledore doesn't instruct him at that point. Oh no, you're mistaken. Everyone dies. Okay? So, they come back out and Dumbledore explains what Harry has learned. Well, Dumbledore questions Harry to draw out from Harry what Harry has learned. And what are a couple of the lessons? Dumbledore says, did you notice how he responded when I told him he had magical abilities? Harry says, next page. He believed it much quicker than I did. I mean, I didn't believe Hagrid at first. Dumbledore, yeah. Why? Riddle was primed to believe he was special. Notice, he didn't believe he was special because someone told it to him. He just thought, naturally, I'm different than everybody else. Okay? Harry, did you know then? And notice Dumbledore completes Harry's question. Did I know I had just met the most dangerous dark wizard of all time? No. Had no idea. But I was intrigued. Okay? So he goes on. He talks about how Tom Riddle punished people, tortured, terrorized people, tortured, killed animals. Harry, yeah, and he was a Parselmouth. Rare ability. And one supposedly connected with the dark arts, although, as we know, there are Parselmouths among the great and the good too. Where in the Harry Potter oeuvre do we ever hear about another Parselmouth? Harry, Voldemort, the gods, in Slytherin. Who else that is great and good? Nobody else. So is Dumbledore talking about Harry there? Although, as we know, there are Parselmouths among the great and the good too. Who else? Is Slughorn a Parselmouth? He's not great and good. Is McGonagall? We're not told. Dumbledore? Okay. Finally, Dumbledore says, next he says, you notice how we responded to the name, Tom. Harry, yeah, he didn't like that. Okay. What else? You will hear, Dumbledore says, this is the last page, many of his Death Eaters claiming they're in his confidence, that they alone are close to him, even understand him. Who have we heard say something like that?
Bellatrix.
Beginning of this book, Bellatrix. Okay? And Snape. Snape talks about being close to the Dark Lord. Okay? They are deluded. Lord Voldemort has never had a friend. Nor do I believe he's ever wanted one. Notice the difference, the distinction between wanting and having a friend. Why wouldn't he want one? What do friends make you?
Weak.
How?
They kind of leave like a vulnerability.
Bingo. Friends make you vulnerable. How so?
Well, that could be your friends, like your enemies probably would end up catching your friends or trying to kill your friends.
Okay. What Harry assumes at the end of this book, when he tells Ginny, he goes all Spider-Man and, MJ on us and says, oh, we can't be together because Voldemort will use it. He'll try to get at me through you. And she says, Harry, F you. We're going to be together no matter what. Okay? What else?
They're people you confide in.
People you confide in, so you reveal secrets, and they then have something over you, in which case they're not a friend, if they look at it that way. What do you give to your friend? Not literally. What do you figuratively give to your friends and ask them to take care of? Your heart. Right? That's what it means to trust, to be loyal, to be faithful to. You are giving part of yourself to that person. You're horcruxing, in a sense, yourself. You're just not killing somebody else to do it. Okay? That's the vulnerability. How do you know your friend is a true friend? Because they don't stab you in the back. They don't leave you when the weather gets rough, so that they're not fair weather friends. Voldemort doesn't want friends. Why? It makes you weak. What did Snape try to impress on Harry in teaching occlumency? What must you do to be a good Occamans? You've got to shut down the emotional side. You got to turn it off. You have to become, in that sense, apathetic, not apathetic. You have to become not caring, not uncaring. Okay, there's a difference between those. So, Harry looks again as they get ready to leave. He looks at the little table and he says, the ring's gone. Very astute, Harry. So between the previous lesson and this lesson, the ring that had been sitting on the table is now gone. Chapter 14, Felix Felicis. We're going to skip a bunch. Yeah, we're going to skip that. Quidditch match. What does Hermione assume is the reason they won? Harry put the Felix Felicis and Ron's pumpkin juice at breakfast. She accuses him of it. Harry says, I didn't. She said, you did. I saw you. And Harry pulls it out of his pocket. Why does Rowling include that?
Well, I mean, because he acts like he put it in there, it gives Ron encouragement. Which, right there saying that he has it all along, he just...
That is, in drug trials, what is that an example of? It's the placebo effect. You think you're getting something, therefore, what's Rowling playing with? The idea that we kind of up here, we can partially make our reality. How so? Your attitude your attitude determines everything. Every one of you has gone into a class before without having the first day of class and you think, oh, I'm just going to absolutely hate this. And then you go in and you're pleasantly surprised. For me, math, I knew I was going to hate it. Guess what? I did. I hated math. Day one. Okay? That attitude shapes your understanding and your perception. That's Rowling's point. Ron isn't a failure because he can't. Ron isn't a failure. Ron doesn't often screw up because he's incompetent. What does Ron lack to an extent that Neville lacks? Confidence. And thus, you got to build that up. Okay? Unbreakable vow. We've already had an unbreakable vow. What is the purpose of this chapter? Chapter 15.
This is where Harry learned about the unbreakable vow, and his complete disdain and distrust of Malfoy increases tenfold.
It's the Christmas party. Slughorn tries to take him aside. Harry goes off and follows Malfoy and Snape. He overhears their conversation. What happened? This is pages 321 and following. Again, I'm going to beat that horse till there's no flesh left on it. What happens every time someone eavesdrops?
It's misinterpreted or didn't get the full information.
They don't hear it all and it's misinterpreted. Okay? He overhears Snape ask, what is your plan? None of your business. You have to confide in me, blah, blah, blah. Chapter 16 Very Frosty Christmas. Yeah, I've got time to get to this point. Page 330. Okay? They're at the Weasleys, and Harry explains to Mr. Weasley what he saw, what he overheard. And Arthur Weasley says, has it occurred to you, Harry, that Snape was simply pretending? Harry, pretending to offer help? Yeah, I thought you'd say that. And he asks a question. But how do we know? Okay? 9:25, we'll stop. We're gonna pick up with this very same page and passage on whatever day that is, Tuesday. And we've gotta finish this. So we're gonna have to skip a lot. There's not gonna be a lot to say after the lightning struck the tower. I'll bring Kleenex if I need to. So if you haven't started Deathly Hallows, man, just forget everything else you're taking this semester and just plow through over the weekend.